Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the Code Roadmap launch webinar. My name is Amy, and I work on the communications team for the RECCo Manager, and I'll be facilitating today's session. I have joining me today Beth from the Technical Design Authority team in the RECCo Manager too. So just to take you through a few bits of housekeeping, this session is being recorded, and the recording and slides for this event will be made available on the REC portal later next week. If everyone could keep their microphones and cameras off and less speaking, it would be greatly appreciated just to minimise disruptions. To take your questions today, we are using Slido, and you can access this via the details that are currently on screen. So if you have your smartphone with you, you can scan the QR code with your camera app, or you can type in slido.com into your web browser and then type in the number that's currently on the screen, and then you will be able to see how to submit your questions that way. We will have a designated Q&A section at the end, but please feel free to raise your questions as they come to you throughout the session. I will now pass over to Beth to take us through the agenda for today.
And I'm still muted. That's a good way to start. Thank you for joining us. So the agenda, we're going to give an overview of what the roadmap is, talk you through the contents of it, and then talk you through the planned engagement and the feedback opportunities. And then, as Amy said, finishing with the Q&A session at the end. So the purpose of today is to give you that introduction to the roadmap, talk you through the content and the structure of it, and invite your questions on that. We'll do a high-level overview of the themes and the epics, and then tell you about the opportunities that you'll have to find out more on the detail of those epics and how you can provide your feedback on them. So what is the roadmap? It might well be something you've heard about in the past. We've been working on it more recently to get it ready for launching. So what it does is it presents the priority work items that RECCo and the Code Manager are planning to progress over the next 3 years. That's the sort of time frame that it covers, and what we should achieve through that work. And the idea is that we want to move more away from the individual change proposals that sort of drop in as and when somebody has a good idea or there's a need identified, to more of a longer term fundamental change plan for all REC stakeholders, including consumers. And it provides that clear view of a bigger picture of the change themes and gives certainty over the future direction of the REC arrangements. This will help us also to better control the pace and the direction of change towards those strategic areas, and supports us in prioritising and better identifies where we can batch changes together and deliver them, therefore, in a more logical and cost-effective order. Quick sort of scene setting where we are at the moment with change, and it says 90 change proposals. It's actually 91. I spotted today. So we've had 91 CPs that have been raised. Obviously, a number of them didn't progress for various reasons. Quite a number have already been delivered, and a number more are either in progress or are waiting to start their plans. And some of those came from transitional issues that were sort of on the books when the SPA and the MRA transitioned over into the REC. Some of those have been directed change. For example, the MSC, the Market Stabilisation Charge, REC V3 last summer. Some of them have been initiated by parties and other stakeholders, and some of them have been initiated by the Code Manager or RECCo. And you could say some have maybe been less impactful. So there have been some that we've progressed that have a quite niche, quite sort of low in terms of the priority impact. Not saying they were unimportant, but know, when you're sort of measuring them against each other, they were fairly sort of low down the scale. But we've also had some that have been really substantial areas. So REC v3 and the subsequent CSS operations changes, and there's been a lot on metering as well. And the word cloud there is not highly scientific, but I just went through the CPs and picked a logical keyword to give them, and then did the word cloud, and the bigger the text, the more we've had in that area. So you can see some are definitely popping up frequently, but there are some notable gaps, or at least notable small volumes of change for things that you might think are more prevalent at the moment in industry. There's more focus, more attention on them. So things like prepayment, theft, net zero, they're not highly prevalent in our portfolio of change so far. So that's a bit of the sort of background of where we've got to. So we're developing the roadmap, and what it contains. The principal element are the epics, and that might be a term that's familiar to you if you've worked with agile project management before. And the epics are essentially work items, and they sit within higher level themes, and then above that higher level categories to kind of give them their groupings. And the epics that we have on the roadmap either come from the RECCo strategy forward work plan items, or from other areas of change that have been identified across the code manager and RECCo. So just to clarify, for today's session, we're not covering the forward work plan items. RECCo yesterday had a webinar on that, and they've got a separate scheme of consultation and engagement on that. So we're steering away, but just worth referencing that it's there, and those items will sit on the roadmap. And the way we're expressing the epics are in statement form, which at the high level will give you a good understanding of what that epic is about. So it tells you who it's for, so who the stakeholders are, what those stakeholders want, what REC products or services are affected or relevant to that epic, and what deliverable or standard within those products and services would want to be achieved. And then the important bit, what would be the outcome at the end of that epic being progressed, being worked on. And so those items of work, the epics, we're going to present them in a Kanban style. Some of you may be familiar with that. We've got a quick visual in a few slides time to show you what that is. But essentially it's time buckets of when work is going to start. So it's not showing you the entire timeline of a piece of work, but it's at what point we're planning to initiate it. So the first time frame is 3 to 6, then 6 to 3 to 6, and then it gets a bit longer time bucket, 6 to 12 and 12 to 36, because obviously the certainty reduces with as you stretch out. And it will also in future be putting on that Kanban style board things that we've done, so you can see what's been completed from the roadmap, and also give you mark something down as we're not doing it, so you can see that if we've decided not to progress something, not to work on something, that's clear, and then obviously we can present why we've taken that decision as well. And then the last element is the backlog. So often that probably has quite negative connotations, things that have been missed out or forgotten about or are running late. But in the agile terminology, it's basically your to-do list, which you haven't yet given a priority to. So it's you sort of, when you're looking at what to work on next or what to put onto the Kanban board next, you would look at your backlog and decide which of those elements now need to be brought forward. I'll pause there before we get into an overview of the categories and themes. Any questions or comments as yet?
We've just had one come through on Slido. So if a change has not been progressed, can it be archived from the change portal and a message come out to parties so we know it is not progressing?
Is that a CP or would that be an epic? I just asked because the CP approach, the actual change proposal approach, isn't. I'll come on to that in a bit of detail later on in the presentation, but that's not being affected. So if something's been raised as a CP, it's got a CP number, that won't be sort of directly affected by the roadmap.
The commenter has just clarified that they did mean a CP for that question.
Yes, I'll come on to that later. So hold fire on that question. Then if I don't explain it well enough when we get to that section, then feel free to come back to us. So categories and themes. So we've got at the moment 5 categories: industry processes, consumers, rec systems, data and digitalisation, and net zero. And then under those are the sort of more granular themes. Won't read them all out. You can see what they are there. The ones with an asterisk are where the epics in those areas are forward work plan items from RECCo. So they're the categories and themes. Next slide, please. And then just for context, as I said, we're not going to go through this, but these are the forward work plan items stretching across the 3 years, and those as the consultation and development process progresses up until the end of March, these will be translated into that Kanban timeline, same Kanban timeline. Next slide, please. So this is the first 2 categories, industry processes and consumers. So there you can see broken down by themes and then the 3 time pots. So the ones that we're proposing to kick off in that first time band starting in at the beginning of April are all around prepayment. We've then a bit further out, we've got an epic on market-wide half-hourly settlement. Obviously, over the next year and a bit, there'll be a lot of work going on to do the necessary drafting. There'll be consequential change work that needs to be picked up, so that's capturing that activity. And we've also got an item on theft around ensuring that stakeholders are clear on their obligations and how they need to comply, and reduction and management of theft. Bit further out, we've got supplier of last resort. Obviously, we've had fewer solar instances recently, but it is an area that we think it's valuable to look at, particularly in terms of the gaining supplier and making sure that they have the information they need to continue normal REC processes for those customers that are affected. And lastly, looking right out into the much more distant future, an exercise to look at the market-wide half-hourly arrangements after they've gone live, and have a kind of a proactive discovery project to look for things that maybe aren't working quite as intended, or there have been ideas for improvements or opportunities to make things even better have been spotted. So that's the first 2 categories. On the next slide, there's the second 2. So net zero only has forward work plan items, so we haven't included it for now on this in this slide deck. So under rec systems, we've got an ongoing epic at the moment around the STEP review, and we're also progressing a number of changes and a number of pieces of work around known issues following the go live of CSS operations last summer. Then in the next time band, we've got access to EES and GES. If you follow the CP list, you might have noticed there have been quite a lot of CPs raised for either new organisation types having access to the inquiry service data, or existing users changing their access. Then a bit further out, we've got post go live review of a sort of proactive review from CSS go live, a look at address quality, and then the furthest category around digitalisation of the data specification. So I'm not asking you to comment on these items at the moment. I think that would be a bit unfair and put you on the spot, but just so you get at least an initial view of the sorts of things we're putting on there at this stage. Can I have the next slide, please? So this slide just sums those up over the 36 months, the different items we've got on there. And I wanted to draw out that on the change proposal side, obviously alongside the work on those epics, we've got a number of releases already on the book. So February, April and June. June's a particularly busy one. They all have content going ahead. Change proposals that already have a plan in place are likely to continue as the plan is agreed, especially if they're at the later stages. And obviously new change proposals will be raised and accepted in as they are now. But what the roadmap gives us is something to prioritise those change proposals against. So at the moment, we do go through a prioritisation exercise for each one, but that's done sort of against its own merits, which is right. But then we've only got other CPs to prioritise it against and to kind of sort of juggle the workload, the capacity that we all have, both on the code manager side, but also participant side. But now we've got the strategic priorities laid out, so we've got something sort of concrete to prioritise change proposals against. And then with the forward work plan epics, as the code manager, we would expect to be supporting and contributing where it's relevant, where it's necessary to RECCo to progress those. Next slide. So I'll just go through this one about what the process is, and then I'll pause again for questions. So what you can expect from the process, it will be formally refreshed on a quarterly basis. But obviously in the background, things will be happening all the time. Changes will be coming up. There'll be issues, there'll be ideas, there'll be external factors that happen. So we'll be responding as we need to on a continuous basis. In terms of the epics themselves, they're likely to essentially run as projects. The exact plan and the approach would be obviously bespoke to that subject matter, including the type and the nature and the extent of stakeholder engagement. And therefore, consequently, they're likely to have the sort of normal project stages you'd expect. So some kind of discovery stage, what is the problem statement, what's the extent of it, and so on, then moving on to an analysis stage to look at solutions, and then presenting some recommendations for change. We would generally expect that those recommendations for change would then be dropped into the CP process, and that would operate as it does now, but hopefully with less effort obviously required on solution development and so on, because that had already been done under the EPIC. But there would still be the formal impact assessment, the formal consultation, so there would still be those opportunities for any affected stakeholder to analyse it and to contribute. And we'd also then be maintaining the backlog, so as new things come up, things might even drop onto the backlog from the epics if something changes, but also we'd probably get more items coming into the backlog, and then on that quarterly basis we'd be reviewing that to see what we could bring in. And hopefully one of the benefits of the visibility that we'll have is that if we're then working on a change or going to start work on a change and we notice that, oh well, if we're lifting the lid on that area, there are some items in the backlog that could go along with it, and therefore be more efficient in the way we process the change where things can be aligned. And then the last point, in terms of the information available, we will be giving you information all the way along about what the epics are, about their progress, about the timeline, about the backlog. There'll be a portal page, and there'll be reports type information made available to you as well. We're still working on that, but one of the points of feedback that we'd like to get from you when we're doing the engagement exercises next month is to give us any ideas you've got for how you'd like to see that information. There will very probably be regular updates to all the committees like we do for the change portfolio now, and we'll also be making sure at those quarterly refreshes there's always sort of dedicated opportunities for feedback, as well as obviously we can take any feedback at any time like we do now, direct to the code manager, to the OAMs, however you want to speak to us about your thoughts on the roadmap. So I'll pause there. Any questions or comments at the moment?
Nothing has come through on Slido.
Okay.
And yeah, we've had nothing come through on the chat either. So I think we can move on.
Hopefully that means it's all making sense. It is obviously very much a work in progress. It will evolve. So you will see hopefully things change and get more sophisticated, for want of a better word to put it, as we work with the roadmap going forward. Next slide, please. So what the code's roadmap is not, it's not explicitly a way to reduce the volume of change. At times it might have that effect, at other times it might increase the volume of change. It's more about making sure that we are making space for and putting focus on those areas that we think are a priority in terms of the outcome we can deliver for RECC stakeholders and consumers. And similarly, it's not a way to stop change proposals being raised. If we have got something on the roadmap penciled in for next year, obviously we would rather people didn't raise the change proposal now. We'd rather they waited until that item was coming up and then feed in their ideas around it. But that's not to say that we couldn't at least have a discussion about it up front. As I said before, it's not a duplication of the change process. That will still run as it does now with those very important impact assessment and consultation and decision stages, but it should help us do the analysis and the solution development in a kind of a slightly different context, maybe within an epic rather than a change proposal, when you can have really quite sort of strict boundaries as to what the issue is. And it shouldn't be a standalone paper exercise. It should be a dynamic activity that really does drive the way we're managing change and the way we're doing change under the RECC. So it should become a really sort of fundamental part of the way we operate. And it's not set in stone for the year. As I said, we will be doing the refreshes formally every quarter, but we'll always be shifting things around if we need to. If there's a good reason to, we can adjust things as we go. Next slide. So just a few questions you might have. What if I have an issue or an idea that fits into a theme on the roadmap? We would very much welcome you coming and talking to us about it. We might be able therefore to discuss other things that we've already got under that epic, so we can see how they can align. If you have an issue or an idea that doesn't fit into a theme on the roadmap, also come and talk to us about it. It might be that it gets progressed as a change proposal. It might be that it becomes a new epic on its own, or it might be that we agree some other way to progress that. But always feel free to raise any issues or ideas that you have with us. And this might answer the question from earlier. What if I have raised a CP that's in the early stages of the change process? As I said, at the moment, we're not planning on altering any change proposal plans that have been agreed already. But where we don't have a change proposal plan, obviously they're effectively sort of backlog items. So we'll be able to evaluate those against the roadmap as well as against the other items on the CP portfolio as we do at the moment. And then the last one, what if I have feedback on the roadmap contents I've seen today? We'll be running through a number of exercises, engagement exercises over the next month or so. And I think that's on the next slide. So we're going to be going to all the committees in February, including the RECCo issues group, and we'll also be putting out a questionnaire. And when we go to the committees and put out the questionnaire, we will be putting out more information about the epics themselves, and then you'll be able to see sort of the grouping and the context for the themes and the themes and the categories. So at that stage we'll be asking you, I'm not putting you on the spot today, although you might already be coming up with ideas and thoughts on the roadmap contents, but that's where we'll sort of go through it in detail, and we'll be able to have a discussion on what we've prioritised and why, and what ideas you've got, which I think leads me on to the next slide, which is what feedback we want. So just another reminder, it's not forward work plan items related, that's being done separately, but in terms of the other items that are on the roadmap, we'll want to know from you, are the main areas of focus included, and consequently is there anything that we have missed out that is significant and you would expect to see on the roadmap? Is there anything you would move much further up, so into an earlier time bucket, or push it back out into the 6 to 12 or 12 to 36 month time buckets? And finally, as I said earlier on, what sort of information or communication on the roadmap will be useful for you? I appreciate once you actually see the portal page and sort of see the reports or whatever it is that we construct, then you'll probably have more views on that. But if there's anything that you'll probably want to know about the epics, that we can design the initial information against, that would be really useful to know as well. So some of you might attend those committees, come along to the RIG, but if you don't, or if you don't have a representative on one of those that you can feed comments back on, then please do look out for the questionnaire that we'll be issuing, and obviously once that's come out, you can always reach out to speak to us if you've got comments you'd rather talk through. So I think that brings us to the end. Oh, summary, apologies. So quickly whizzing through the key things to take away. The purpose is to provide that information on what the change priorities are for the REC and the longer term direction of travel for the REC arrangements. The main thing on the roadmap is these epics, these work items or projects, and they sit within groupings of themes and categories. The epics will likely be progressed as projects with recommendations that go into the change processes as one or more CPs. And then we've got this backlog of items that haven't yet been prioritised, and they'll remain there until it's a good time to bring them forward. CPs can still be raised. This isn't a way to stop that, and in-flight or approved CPs will probably not be affected by the roadmap launch. It will be refreshed quarterly, and we'll be seeking feedback, as I said, through February, ready for the launch at the end of March, and then ongoing on a quarterly basis or at any other time that you want to discuss with us. So I think that is the end. Any other thoughts or questions on Slido?
We haven't had any come through at the moment. So just a reminder, if you joined us late, you can access Slido by scanning the QR code that's on screen or typing the number on screen into slido.com in your web browser. If you have any last minute questions, please feel free to submit those now. Okay, so we've not had anything come through, so I think we can wrap the session up. So thank you, Beth.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you to everyone for joining us today. We really appreciate your participation. And just a final note from me, I have set up a survey on Slido to collect your feedback. So any feedback that you may have for us, we would greatly appreciate it. Please feel free to leave any comments, and it will help us to tailor future events to your needs. So thank you, everyone, and have a good afternoon.